My name is Margaret. I'm 71 years old and have lived my whole life in the same wooden house on a quiet street in Bloomington, Indiana. Pious Stone. I lost my husband too soon in an accident that still hurts when winter comes. I raised my son, Max, alone, and I don't say this with pride, but with tiredness. I worked for decades in the city library, always with the same coat and the same pair of shoes, because every dollar that was left, it was for him. Have you ever wondered what happens when we give our all for someone? And does that someone just forget that you exist? Not by distraction, but by choice, out of coldness. I know what that is. And if you also feel that emptiness, that question stuck in your throat, that why, that no one answers, then maybe this story is for you, because it begins with a short sentence, but one that cut deeper than any scream. Margaret, we got married yesterday. In this video, I'll tell you how this phrase changed my life, and more. I'll show you that even the most forgotten woman in the family can find a strength that no one expects. Because there are things that we don't need to avenge with anger. Just leave the table. But before we dive into the heart of this story, I need you to know one thing. As much as it pains to remember, I carry every detail as if it had happened yesterday, because it was on that day, in front of a phrase said coldly, that a part of me died and another was born. I helped pay for the wedding dress. I bought furniture, covered the rent for more than 3 years, was a mother, counselor, and even a driver when they needed it. But on the wedding day, I was left out. Lena said that with a smile on her face, as if it were nothing, as if I was nobody. And what they didn't know is that that silent old woman they underestimated. I remembered everything. If you've come this far, if this story touches you in any way, if you've ever felt that they turned their backs on you just at the moment when you most deserve to be there. So, stay with me. This story is heavy, but I'm not telling it to feel sorry. I'm telling it because I know you understand. If you want to walk with me through these memories, leave your like, subscribe, and accompanies me now, because today I'm going to open a part of my chest that has been locked up for too long. And that Sunday, I woke up early, as always. I made my black coffee very strong, as I like, and left a kettle on the fire while I arranged the cushions in the room. The dress was still hanging on the bedroom closet door, light pink, of light fabric, with details that I embroidered myself. I bought that cloth in a small shop in Nashville when I went to visit my cousin 2 years earlier. I kept it fondly, thinking, wow, this is going to be for my boy's wedding day. It took a while, but the time has come. Max met Lena. They fell in love. Talked about gathering the rags, and I got involved with everything. I paid their rent for a long time, helped with furniture, paid a debt on Lena's card, even the wedding dress. I was the one who gave it. They said they were still seeing a date. Details were missing. And I, with my heart already celebrating, decided to call to confirm. Is that it? A call to know the day, the time, the place. A simple gesture of a mother who wants to be present. I dialed the number and waited. She was the one who answered, with that voice always sweet on the outside, but that never convinced me inside. Hi, Margaret. Is that okay? I said yes. I asked when the ceremony would be. She laughed, as if it were something silly, and said, "Oh, you Margaret, Margaret, Yom. I didn't told it to go die. We got married yesterday. It was something very intimate. We only invite special people. Oh, we only invite special people." I stood still. The kettle whistled in the background. I so sighed, but it seemed far away. The phone slipped a little out of my hand, and my chest became cold. It wasn't just the disappointment. It was as if someone had pulled me down, as if I was invisible within the very story of my life. Max was there, sitting on the couch. He heard me ask. He heard me being excluded, but he said nothing. He didn't even look at me. He just lowered his head. No, as if he knows he did something wrong. And prefers to pretend that it did not happen. Oh, why so bad. I hung up the phone without saying anything else. I don't even know how. I went back to the kitchen and took the kettle off the fire, my hand shaking. The smell of coffee filled the house, but it had no taste. I sat at the end of the table, cup in hand, and stared at the dress. He was still there, flawless, waiting for the day that never came, waiting for an invitation that never came. It was beautiful. The dress, Leo, fine, delicate, but now it seemed like a portrait of everything I was to them. An expendable detail, a prop that didn't even deserve to be remembered. It was a strange pain. Drought, no scandal, all, only silence. You know, there are moments in life that don't hurt with screams, hurt with absence, with what is not said, with what is hidden. When Lena said that phrase, it wasn't just a wedding that happened without me. It was the confirmation that, for them, I was no longer needed. I was just a convenient old woman when I paid the bills, but too inconvenient to be in the picture. Emotional pause, and I keep thinking, how many women like me have felt this way? Forgotten by those who helped the most, erased from the stories they themselves built. If you've ever been through something like this, if you've ever felt excluded, ignored, left out by those you only wanted to love, he comments here with I've lived it, because I need to know that I wasn't the only one, that there are more people out there who understand this kind of silent pain. Back to narrative. That same day, I left the dress in storage. I didn't throw it away. Not yet, but I kept it in the back of the closet, as if hiding a wound that still bleeds. Max left the house without saying a word. No excuse. No hug. No, nothing. just the sound of the door closing slowly. No, that broke me in a way that I can't even explain. Because the biggest pain was not what Lena said. That's what my son kept silent. But in that silence, something began to move inside me, as if a part of my soul, tired of being passive, began to wake up. I still didn't know what to do, but I knew that something had changed, and forever. Now, do you want to know what I did after that? Well, continue. Just wait and see, because what they forgot, it's just that I don't forget anything. I sat in that kitchen chair all afternoon. The sun came through the window and hit the floor, but inside me it was winter, a silent cold. Made of absence and disappointment. The house was quiet, as if even she had understood what had happened. And there, with my hands resting on the table, where I began to remember. It wasn't on purpose. It was as if my body, my memory, my soul had started pulling the drawers inside, and each one brought a sacrifice, a delivery, unrequited kindness. No, I remembered the time I paid 2 months of rent for them, when Max lost his job at the print shop and Lena was just doing some freelancing. At the time, I didn't hesitate. I just withdrew from my savings and transferred. It was more than $1,800. And when I asked if they needed anything else, she replied, for now, it's great. You're an angel. Margaret, angel. Today I see that they use this word as someone complimenting a soft mattress. It only works as long as it is comfortable. Then came the furniture. Their living room was empty, and I didn't want my son to feel embarrassed when he had visitors. I bought a sofa, a bookshelf, a bookshelf, a television in 12 installments on my card. I chose everything carefully, even combining colors. Everything delivered directly to their home. Lena took a photo smiling. Richard Abdanikanen, and Hilkata smiling, holding a new pillow, and sent it with a thank you. Mother-in-law? How? I saved that photo. Today, I can't look anymore. Walmart shopping then? There were so many. Were so many. Once a month. I would fill the car with bags and drive to Indianapolis. Milk, rice, soap, diapers for the cats who adopted it. Yes, even the cats I helped feed, and they never asked with arrogance, always with that sweet way, as if doing a favor by accepting help. And I, silly, smiled as if I was being useful, as if that were love. One day, Lena called me for coffee and said she was worried about the wedding costs. I said it was tight, that Max didn't want to ask me for anything, but that beautiful wedding dress was too expensive. I took $800 out of my drawer, in cash, and gave it to her right there. She cried, down on the chico. I had started on them. He hugged me. He said I was a second mother. Today, when I think about it, it makes me nauseous. I also remember the Christmas when I gave them that new microwave after hearing, by chance, that the old one took too long to heat up. From the dinner set I bought in the fall, from supermarket gift cards, of the Easter baskets, everything. I even stopped taking a trip. My sister, Leon Heiss, who lives in Boston, invited me to spend a week with her. It had been in more than 10 years since we had seen each other. But just that week, Max called me saying that the car had broken down and that he didn't know how he was going to work. I didn't think twice. I canceled the trip, stayed nearby, paid half of the repair. I said to myself, that family comes first. And do you know what I got in return? A secret wedding. It's a phrase that took me out of the category of special person. With each memory that came back, it seemed that a knife was passed in the same place. But I didn't cry. I wrote it down. No, yeah. I took an old notebook from the library, one of those hardcover ones, and started to make a list. Date, value, motive, no. Everything, line by line. What acid you will chuck said. I filled in what I gave, and what I took from myself. It was my inventory of wasted love and time. And the more I wrote, the more I understood. That was not taken care of. It was abuse, a polite form of exploration, a kindness that has become an obligation. The television was on, but I didn't even see it. Advertisements for wedding dresses, buffets, travel packages for couples were shown. It all seemed to me like a distant theater, a staging from which I was taken before the first scene. I was too busy facing the one reality that still hurt me. I did everything for them, and they hid me. Maybe deep down, they thought I was weak, that my age made me easy to manipulate, that my mother's love would blind me forever. And I confess, for a long time, it really blinded. But exclusion has a power that we underestimate, because when someone has the courage to erase you from their history, that's when you start writing yours. And it was there, in that late afternoon with the smell of old coffee and yellowish paper, that I decided they would never use me again. They would never treat me as an ace up my sleeve, for when the bill tightened, they thought they left me out of just one wedding. But in fact, it was the last day they had me around. Now tell me something. What would you do if you found out that the worst was yet to come? Because what happened days later showed that the wound was deeper than I imagined. The next morning, what is it called? I woke up before sunrise, as I always did, but for the first time in a long time, I didn't go straight to the kitchen to prepare Mac's coffee. I didn't leave the bread separate, nor did I arrange the lunchbox for him to take. I also didn't send a message asking how he had slept. I didn't even offer a ride. Not good morning. The house was in a silence that seemed strange because it was so deep, but in a way, protector, a silence that embraced me. I sat in the rocking chair on the balcony, still in my nightgown, with my feet swollen by time and heartache, and stayed there, watching the quiet street in my neighborhood, the noise of dry leaves falling from the trees, the children going to school with backpacks on their backs, the couples leaving, holding hands. Everything went on as if nothing had happened, as if the world hadn't collapsed inside my chest the afternoon before. And I kept asking myself, how did I let my life slip through my fingers like this? How did I manage to annul myself so much by people who, deep down, never looked at me as someone, only as a resource, a little help, a support, a lap, a paid bill, an automatic deposit, an old woman who never complained? I found myself there, alone, wise, calm, with the smell of autumn coming through the balcony, and a phrase repeating inside my head like a scratched record. Oh, well, we only invite special people. Is that it? 3 seconds of sentence. A sentence that cut me from the inside out. I wasn't special. Not enough. Maybe it never was. And this question corroded me. Was I, for Max, ever more than a ladder? Because when he needed to go up, I was always there for him to step on. Behind. The phone rang around noon. No, it was her number. Lachau. From Lena. So kind. I'm talking. I stared at the screen for a while before answering. My finger even trembled. Answered, "Oh, with you." On the other side, the voice came nervously. Ma. Accelerated, and almost crying. She said that the rent for the apartment had been overdue for 2 months, that the owner of the building was threatening to throw them both out, that Max hadn't gotten a new job yet, and that she hated having to ask for this, but had no one else to call. No. I listened to everything in silence, every word as if it were a nail being beaten into the coffin of my patience. And when she finished with that, Margaret, we just need a little push. I took a deep breath, and I replied calmly, as if I was just informing the time. I only help special people. And I hung up. I stood there, holding the phone in my hand, my heart racing and my legs shaking. But it wasn't my fault. It was strength. No. For the first time, I gave it back. For the first time, I used their own phrase as a shield. No. And I didn't have to scream. I didn't have to threaten. I just had to tell the truth, theirs. And in that moment, I felt that something in me had turned, like a key, a door, or maybe a gate that had been locked for years. I was no longer that mother available for everything, that kind lady who they knew would never say no. For the first time, endowed, I said, "Nuam," and it was as if I had taken back a piece of me that had been borrowed for decades. But what I didn't know yet was that the silence I gave that day, it would have consequences that none of us imagined. Because what happened next showed me how far they were willing to go. Hey, honey, there was no turning back. That night, after hanging up the phone in Lena's face, I stayed up late, sitting at the living room table with a hardcover notebook, a simple calculator, and a bunch of statements scattered around. It was strange to see my life there, summarized in receipts, invoices, and envelope notes. Each line had a memory. Each number was a piece of my delivery. I started writing. First, the large amounts, the rents paid, the furniture purchased, the debts covered. Now, then, the small gestures, which, added together, weighed more than you imagine. Market, mum, medicines, gifts, gasoline, even that online course that Lena wanted to take, and that would change her life. By the end of the night, wow, it was over $30,000. 30,000 in 3 years. 30,000 coming out of a tight retirement, from an account that I fed for decades with what was left of the library and sewing odd jobs. 30,000 of love and care and calm and love at his soul, of sacrifice, of trust. And all this for what? To be left aside with an icy phrase. But eine Niederland wodernste sich unterm Sarah at least. Incredible as it may seem, how I didn't feel angry. Not the kind that burns and makes us want to break everything. What I felt was a harsh calm, a cold lucidity, as if I had finally taken off the blindfold. And there, wow, in the middle of all that paperwork, I understood something that may take a lifetime to realize. That helping too much for love, it is also a way of abandoning oneself. The next day, Mom, I took my shower early, put on a navy blue dress that I always wear when I need to solve serious things, and went straight to the bank, the same as always, on the corner of 7th and Walnut, where the manager, Keisters, Mr. Klein, Hayen, Aunetus, already knew me by name. He greeted me with that gentle smile of someone who still believes in good manners. Margaret, what a pleasure to see you. How are things? I smiled back, but with another firmness. I just replied, I just replied. Now they are. I sat in his chair, and took out of my bag the papers I had prepared, and was direct. I wanted to cancel all automatic transfers. No more rent. No more additional card. No more emergency aid. I also asked to change my passwords. And, finally, I asked to remove Max as a beneficiary of my account. He was silent for a moment. Then asked, "Are you sure, Mrs. Loud?" "I'm down, Margaret." I looked him in the eye and said, for the first time in my life, when I left the bank, the city looked the same as always. But I was no longer the same. The trees kept throwing leaves on the sidewalks of Bloomington. The cars kept passing by. The young people from the university walked in a hurry. But I walked slowly, with another weight, or rather, with less weight. For the first time in many years, I felt like I was choosing myself. No. Sometimes we spend so much time taking care of others that we forget to take care of ourselves. I'm here now. Opening my heart, telling all this not to make me a victim, but because I know there are a lot of people on the other side who have felt used, forgotten, exploited by those they said they loved. And if you're one of those people, or is you're one of those people, if this is touching you in any way, leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, not for me, but for you, because I still have a lot to tell you, and maybe more. In the midst of what I have experienced, you will also find a piece of yourself. I returned home empty-handed, but my soul was beginning to be filled. I gathered all the receipts, organized them in a red folder with a new label, Margaret 2025. I kept it in the closet, next to the box where the photos of the little Max are. Yes, I still do. He was 5 years old, dressed as a cowboy. He hugged his father before the accident. He looked at me with that look that today it no longer exists. But I didn't tear anything. Not yet, because forgetting is easy. Remembering and moving on, that does require strength. That night, I slept better. I dreamed about my husband. He was on the porch of the house, waiting for me with a cup of tea and a blanket. He smiled at me and said, "It took a while." Huh? I woke up with teary eyes, but in peace, because deep down, there you go, I knew he would have done the same, but I still had no idea what was coming. Because days later, case, Max showed up at my door, and what he said, it made me doubt even what it is to be a mother. 2 days later, Tuesday that seemed ordinary. I left early to buy some things at the corner market. I took my cloth bag, as always, bought apples, bread, what else? Tea, and a small piece of pecan pie, just because I felt like it. I walked slowly home, feeling the cold autumn wind hit my face, the dry leaves piled up on the sidewalk, and the city had that sweet end-of-season smell. But when I turned down the street and saw my door ajar, my heart jumped. I quickened my pace, with the bag dangling on my arm, and entered slowly. The scene that awaited me seemed to be taken from a nightmare. Max was in the room, sitting in my favorite armchair, with a landscape face. Lena was standing near the bookcase, her eyes red, and among them, a man in a dark suit, leather briefcase, cold expression. I didn't know him. Margaret, I'm glad you're here. Nibbed and calm, Lena said in a soft voice, trying to sound sweet. We were just waiting for you. I didn't say anything. I just closed the door behind me and left the groceries on the chair. The man introduced himself as a lawyer. He spoke slowly, with that condescending tone that many use with people my age. He said they were worried about me, that some recent decisions raised doubts, that I seemed to be acting confused, and that, for my protection, it would be best to leave Max in charge of my legal and financial affairs. Max didn't look me in the eye. He kept fiddling with the zipper of his coat like a boy caught in a lie. Lena pretended to wipe away tears that wouldn't fall. We just want to help you. Margaret, you've been so alone. Oh, she said. And then the lawyer took a bundle of papers out of his briefcase. A power of attorney. I know that type of document. Years ago, I helped my neighbor make one to take care of her sick sister, Limpton. I know what it means. To sign that was to give them total power. It meant giving up my autonomy, of my life, of my name. I stood there, looking at each one of them. Lena held out a pen to me. Sign here, Nedid one, mein Tabet. It's just a procedure. You'll continue with everything the same. We just want to protect you. And Max, finally, said, one way you can now. Mom, it's the best for all of us. All of us. Not for you, not for love, for all of us. At that moment, something ignited inside me. A silent, dense anger. Kadish, is it my toe, a stainless dempsey, a mixture of indignation and lucidity. I took the papers calmly. I didn't sign. I just folded it slowly, put it under my arm, and said, I raised you with love. And you treat me like an obstacle. Max lowered his eyes. Lena tried to say something, but I raised my hand, without shouting, just firmly. Get out of my house. Now. Nasal. Down. Tokarigan. They hesitated. No. Bowed to the Jews. The lawyer said that I could be making a mistake. I replied, the biggest mistake was letting you in. I walked to the door. Pace, opened it, and stood there, waiting. One by one. They passed me in silence. Lena was the last. He tried to touch my arm. Will. I backed off, and when the door closed, I locked the lock for the first time since my husband died. The house fell silent, a different silence from before, heavier, and I went to the kitchen, washed the apples, tried to pretend it was just another day. But his hands trembled. Cried. I'd cried angrily, with disappointment, with an old pain that finally exploded. It was not fear. It was disgusting. It was a mourning for someone who was still alive, but he was no longer my son. Whatever. I spent the whole night with the papers on the table, rereading each clause, thinking about what would have happened if I had arrived half an hour later, thinking about how two people I helped so much were able to put together such a plan. They wanted to declare me senile, incompetent, unable, just to take care of what's mine, of what I have fought my whole life to build. Newborn son. And the cruelest. It's just that they did it smiling. But what they didn't know, it's just that I also know how to smile. And that, from that day on, I would smile with my head held high. Because this war, it was just beginning. And I was still going to show them what an old woman like me is capable of. Now, Now, can you imagine what I found out the following week? Because that's when their lie began to unravel. The day after that cowardly invasion, I woke up early. No, I'd stick there. I didn't sleep almost anything, but I still got up with a firm body. I had already shed a lot of tears in my life. Now it was time to put up a wall. I went straight to the hardware store on 3rd Street and ordered, with all the calmness in the world, a new set of reinforced locks. The guy who answered me tried to convince me to call an installer, but I smiled and said, "Oh, honey, do you really think that a woman who has raised a child alone doesn't know how to change a lock?" He laughed, of course, but his gaze changed, and by then I was already beginning to understand. Oh, I could look fragile on the outside, but inside, a wall was born. I installed everything with my own hands, every latch, every screw. Then I called a security company in Bloomington and asked for a camera system with a motion sensor. I want to see who comes in and who goes out, day and night. They scheduled the installation for Friday, and on Wednesday, I went further. I bought a safe, small, safe, portable, with electronic password. I put my documents, bank records, passport, and that red folder with all the statements I organized that morning. No one else was going to touch what is mine. But I knew that locking the door was not enough. The threat came from within, and what they tried to do was not just a betrayal. It was a crime. So I made an appointment with a lawyer they recommended to me at the library. Mr. Napkins, Howard Weber, Lee D. Discreet office, close to the central square. I entered with cold hands and a full head. When he called me, he offered coffee, refused. I wanted to get straight to the point. I told him everything, word for word. The hidden marriage, Lena's, Frau's, Mac's silence, the attempt to make me sign the power of attorney, the fake tears, the roles. The lawyer, Montao, went in stranacanis and steghaltwa, everything. He listened to me as one who listens to a testimony, without interrupting, just taking notes and observing. When I finished, he took a deep breath, leaned his elbows on the table, and said, "No, Margaret, what you're facing is called financial abuse, and that, in the United States, is serious." He explained to me that this type of case is more common than you might think, that many sons, daughters-in-law, nephews take advantage of the fragility of the elderly to try to take control of the money, the house, the goods, that there is a pattern of manipulation, isolation, and, often, attempted interdiction. He looked me in the eye and said, "Okay, but you did everything right." He didn't sign anything, and he came here. We opened a protocol. He instructed me to document every interaction with them from then on. That I kept messages, recorded conversations, and updated my will. Yes, my will. Nay. Do you want these people to have access to what you have built with so much effort? And at that moment, I realized, was, I could still choose. I could still decide where my legacy goes. And for the first time, I chose myself. If you want, we can redo your will right now, he said. Oh, and I nodded. Wow. Take it easy. No rush. We signed everything. He explained to me that if they try to act again, with false allegations, he will be ready to defend me. I left my emergency contact to be my neighbor, Sandra, who has known me for 30 years and, unlike Max and Lena, has never asked me for anything. On the way out of the office, I sat on the bench in the square for a moment. I watched the leaves of the trees fall, the dogs chasing squirrels, and for the first time in decades, I took a deep breath with the feeling that I was taking care of myself. My whole life, everything I've done has been for someone, and suddenly, I was building something for myself, for me, not out of vanity, but for justice. Because sometimes the best way to love, it is to set a limit. Oh, and look, if you have come this far with me, listening to all this, I beg you, I'll stay until the end, because as much as it already seems heavy, the most striking is yet to come. There's a moment in this story that I never told anyone, and today it will be the first time. I returned home that day with the feeling of being armed, not with anger, not with a desire for revenge, but clarity of those who, did it, for the first time, understood its value. But what I didn't know yet is that the next blow would come from where I least expected it, and this time it would be public, very public. And that Friday afternoon, the sun began to beat down on the balcony. I was sitting with a book on my lap, one that I reread so many times that the pages were already yellowed, but my head couldn't get into the story. The words flowed from my mind like water. Since it all began, my heart carried a bitter mixture of grief and lucidity. It was like losing someone who was still breathing, like burying what was left of trust. It was on that day that I heard a voice coming from the gate. Your garden is beautiful, Margaret. I looked up and saw a lady with white hair tied in a loose bun, a flowery dress, and a serene smile. And, it was Eleanor, my neighbor on the corner. I knew it by sight, but we had never really talked. I replied with a smile, without strength, and she, without asking too much permission, came closer. Is there coffee in there? He asked, laughing, invited. I'd say, how Kyle was it. Oh no time with his subject. And that invitation changed more than my afternoon. We sat down in the kitchen, and I prepared 2 steaming cups. At first, we exchanged light phrases about the weather, about the city, about the memories of when the children were still small. But it didn't take long for the truth to start coming out. She looked me in the eyes and said, I noticed that quieter, and quieter, and I confess to you that I recognize this kind of silence. That disarmed me. Now, I collapsed. I told him everything, every detail, the hidden marriage, that time, the power of attorney, the cutting sentences, pain without screaming. Eleanor listened to me with a rare calmness. When I finished, she took my hand and said, "Wow, Margaret, my daughter did the same with me. She called me crazy when I stopped paying for her car. He said I was in need of help. We think it's just with us, but there are a lot of women going through this." At that time, a knot broke inside his chest. Hide again, Mom. I smoke you again, but it was a different cry of recognition, of relief, because for the first time I felt truly understood, not as a victim, but as someone who survived. From that day on, Eleanor became my routine. Nice one ourselves, roasting. We met every afternoon. Coffee, cake, conversation, wine. We laughed. Sometimes we cried, but we always came back lighter. She introduced me to other neighbors in the neighborhood, all with stories of ingratitude that, from a distance, would seem made up. Now, there was Susan, who was kicked out of her own house by her son-in-law. Ruth, now, who stopped going to her own birthday because her daughter forgot. And Hilda, who raised her grandchildren while her son traveled all over the country. And then she was called a selfish old woman when she needed help. Each encounter with them was a mirror. And at the same time, a window. We talked about loneliness. Yes, but also of strength, of how we were created to serve, to accept, to shut up, and how the time has come to speak, to take up space, to be the owner of her own history. No one there wanted revenge. What we wanted was to be seen. There was a day when Eleanor said, "Tom, we don't grow old and disappear. We grow old and see." And that phrase stayed with me, because it's true. Age does not take away our value. It only reveals those who have never seen us as people. And if there's something I learned from this circle of women, being forgotten hurts, but recognizing yourself frees. Emotional pause. And look, if you've ever been through something like this, if you've ever been left out, if you've ever felt that kind of silent pain, comments below. It can be just an "I understand you" or a "it's true," because each comment is like a chair pulled in this wheel that we create. And I want to know that you're here with us. Back to narrative with these women. I smiled again. I went back to cooking for myself, not for others, to decorate my house, not for visiting, but for my own joy. I went back to listening to loud music, dancing alone in the living room, and so writing in the library notebook. Every simple gesture was like a seed back into my inner garden. And for the first time in a long time, I started thinking about the future, my future, one that didn't depend on anyone. But what I didn't know, it's just that while I was reborn inside, they plotted on the outside, and their next attempt, it involved a lie, too big to ignore. It's too cruel to be forgiven. The letter arrived on a cold November morning, one of those when the ground seems to creak with sadness. I found it folded in the middle of the beads, with my name written in hard, Nuaco de Sode, or Hugh, in personal letters. When I opened it and read the first few lines, the world turned. Max and Lena had filed for legal protection. They claimed that I was in a state of advanced senility. They used those words. I tried to reread it 2, 3 times. His vision blurred. I couldn't believe it. No, it wasn't just a fight. It was a sentence. They wanted to declare me incapable. They wanted to take the rest I had left. My house, my account, nay, Snowcom, my life. I sat at the kitchen table for hours. I didn't touch the coffee. I didn't take off my coat. The silence was so thick that it seemed as if the very air was pushing me against the chair. I took the wooden box where I keep the memories. Among the old notes and my husband's letters, I found the photo. Max at 8 years old, kneeling in the backyard, hugging Benny. Whoa, a stray dog. I remember that day I had made lemonade. He laughed because Benny had stolen a piece of bread from his hand. It was another time, another boy. Or maybe it was just a fantasy that I invented to endure the absence of love. Because the Max of now, he wasn't my son. He was a stranger. Cried. No, not as they got on. Cried. As I had never cried. It wasn't just pain. It was a mourning without a coffin. It was to admit that that bond that I found eternal, it had been Albert I can't mistakenly said, I want to. Perhaps one way. Well, I asked myself, what if the judge believes them? What if they think I really lost my reason? What if they take my house, my account, my right to leave, to choose, to live? The pain was so deep that it hurt even in the bone. It was as if my own story was being torn from me, sheet by sheet, by the one I taught myself to read. I stayed there for hours, without moving. The sun changed position. The shadows invaded the kitchen. 9. The kettle cooled. Until I unstopped. In the midst of this emptiness, a different sensation began to grow. It wasn't fury. It was not despair. It was a firmness I hadn't felt in years. Something that came from within, very deep, like a root that has gone through the earth, slowly, in silence, until it finds firm rock. It was certainty. I was going to fight. I was going to prove that I am lucid, that I am present, that I am strong, and that, if Max wanted war, have, but not with scandal, narrow piles, not with shouting, but with evidence, with documents, with witnesses, with the truth that I carry in every line of my face and in every bill I paid for it. Raised the next I washed my face, and I went to the bedroom to get that red folder. Because now, more than ever, she would be my weapon, Ha. I called Mr. Howard Weber. I told him what had arrived. He told me, let's respond. Leo, line by line. We city out. They picked the wrong fight. And at that moment, I knew, it wasn't going to be easy. But also, they didn't know who they were dealing with, because there's something that time teaches us. A woman who endures everything for love. She is the same one who knows how to knock down in silence when she needs to. And what I prepared in the following days. Max never imagined. The hearing was scheduled for a Wednesday morning. Cloudy skies. As if even the weather was uncertain about what would happen there. I got up early. Took a leisurely shower, and chose a low-key ensemble, a dark blue knitted blouse, and my gray skirt that I wear on important occasions. I put on a light perfume, one of those that my husband said suited me, and I went mad. Mr. Howard Weber stopped by the house to pick me up, and I didn't become. I did not try to Sophia. We enter the court without haste, but with each step measured as if we know we have nothing more to lose. And precisely for this reason, we have everything to defend. Max was already there, sitting in the front row, in a light suit and with the face of a worried son. Lena next to her, dressed in white, as if purity, if she bought it, in a department store, and behind them, a young lawyer. Why don't I did it change to ice? One of those who smile at the corner of their mouths and think they are smarter than any woman with wrinkles. I was silent. Hell, I sat on the opposite side of the room, and for a moment looked at the wooden floor. I knew this type of wood well. It was the same one I cleaned for years in the library, but now knew it would be the scene of another cleansing. The session began. Max was the first to speak. His voice was trained. No denial. He said he loved me, but that he had been noticing troubling changes. That I was suspicious, reclusive, emotionally unstable. Lena entered the sequence. He feigned tears. She said that she tried to get closer to me, that I created barriers, that I was stuck in old hurts. Their lawyer presented alleged accounts from neighbors, generalizations, assumptions. They tried to paint a picture of a woman who no longer knew how to distinguish affection from fantasy. But then the judge turned his eyes to me, and that's when Mr. Guillaume Weber stood up, red briefcase in hand. Your Excellency, he began. Night, and Chincho, a seal was there no trial. His voice deep and paused. What we have here are serious but unfounded accusations. My client is in full use of her reason. What she has faced. In fact, is a growing pattern of financial and emotional abuse, which is unfortunately becoming commonplace in this country. He put a sequence of documents on the table. First, the bank statements, proving the transfers made to Max and Lena for more than 3 years. Then, receipts, rent, furniture, clothes, medicines, even the wedding dress that Lena never wore, bought with my card. Then there are emails and text messages, all coherent, full of affection and attention, but also marked by the absence of response. by ingratitude disguised as routine. Finally, the report of an independent psychiatrist stating that I am mentally lucid, emotionally stable, and, above all, aware of all my acts and decisions. The judge looked at the papers for long minutes. Then he raised his head and called me by name. Mrs. Margaret, would you like to say something? I took a deep breath. I hadn't rehearsed any lines. I only looked at the referee, then at Max. He didn't face me. He had his eyes fixed on the wall, like a boy who knows he will be scolded and tries to pretend that it is not with him. So I said, I created a man. I gave everything I had. Love, food, shelter, study, time, peace. But today, I see only one boy, a boy who learned to lie politely. The silence in the room was absolute. The judge adjusted his glasses, looked at the documents again, and then declared, "Oh, this symptom. Process suspended for lack of evidence." And I leave a clear warning. The judicial system is not a tool for family conflicts in bad faith. I left the room without saying another word. Mr. Juan Weber accompanied me to the car. When I entered, no, my hands were shaking. Not out of fear, of relief. I had won. The first battle. For the first time, justice looked at me and saw me as I am, whole. And if this piece of my life can become a mirror or a hug for someone, help me carry it forward. Like and subscribe here to the channel. It makes more difference than you think. Sometimes all a woman needs is to know that her story matters, that she is not alone, that there is strength even in the weakest hands when they hold truth. But of course, Max did not take the defeat well. And what did he try to do after that? It exceeded any limit I thought he still had. Want to know what he had the courage to invent? Because the next lie almost destroyed my name. After that hearing, I returned home with my shoulders straighter, not out of pride, but out of duty fulfilled, and also for something that only those who have been stepped on understand. When we survive the attempt to erase, we don't go back to who we were. I was no longer the Margaret who expected recognition, who justified rudeness with weariness, who interpreted silence as timid love. I was different, and this new version of me, I didn't owe anyone else anything. That same week, I began doing what I called a survival cleanup. I went to the bank and asked for the end of the automatic transfers for Max and Lena's rental. Immediate cancellation. No doubt. We start. Then I called the health plan. I was the one who paid for the coverage of the two for almost 2 years. Silently. Like everything else I did. I ended the bond. I asked to issue the cancellation receipts and filed everything with date and signature. The next day, I contacted my private pension company. Max was a beneficiary. I named the organization Safe Haven Women's Home, a local shelter that takes in elderly women abandoned by their families. I got to know this place through Eleanor. I went there, visited, and when met the ladies. and understood that if any of my possessions have to be left for someone, let it be for those who know the value of a gesture. I went to the registry office and updated my will. Max has always been the sole heir to the house here in Bloomington. Today, it is no longer. I wrote in my own handwriting that I leave the house to safe haven. Signed, Montagtown. I recognized the signature. I left the registry office without telling anyone. I didn't send an email. I didn't make a scene. Heinashig Wakadatuad, because screaming revenge doesn't interest me. What I did was silent justice, and there's nothing more powerful than that. A couple of days later, now, Max tried to use that debit card that was previously linked to my account. I knew that he used it in secret. He bought things in the name of the mother who always helped. Only this time, Mama, it didn't work. And, as I imagined, he called nay back on thrice. I didn't answer. He sent a message. I deleted it without reading. The next day, what you done? It was Lena who tried. He wrote a huge email, all decorated with disguised guilt. Margaret, we need to talk. We're worried about you. I read, smile, Lynn, see, I asked to touch and so we're on sale. And I did. Wow. Because the old lady who paid for everything disappeared from the system. And if there's one thing I do like you to understand, it's this: when we stop feeding what destroys us, silence becomes a shield. Wow. And the shield, my dear, is the first step towards freedom. Sometimes I wonder if he imagines what comes next. Because if all this seems strong to you, what I will still tell you is what really turned my world upside down. Get ready, because what Max tried to do next, it even left his lawyer open-mouthed. The entail was set neatly, lacy tablecloth, antique ceramic plates, lit candles, even though it was just a dinner between neighbors. Eleanor had this gift of transforming the ordinary into care. Each lady brought a different dish. Ruth made potato salad with dill. Hilda took a peach pie that fell apart in her mouth. And I, down. Well, I took my famous cornbread with honey butter. Wes, my mother's recipe. It was a simple night, but one that seemed loaded with meaning, as if each spoonful had a taste of time. History, survival. After dinner, we all sat in the living room, a circle of women with more wrinkles than memories told, but with a sparkle in their eyes that no youth erases. Judith, no, the most chatty, Manchai, brought up the subject. Why, Margaret, you haven't told your story yet. The real one? Ah, I looked around. No, they all looked at me, not with pity, but with respect. I took a deep breath, and for the first time, I told everything, from start to finish. The pink dress, Lena's call, the cutting phrase, the request for guardianship, the betrayal of my own son. I spoke without crying. The firm, my someday kai, one touching cattle, straight voice, now none. As someone who delivers a testimony, not a lamentation. They listened in silence. When I finished, Eleanor hugged me. Oh, Judith was teary-eyed. She was the one who said, "Nay, this story needs to get out of this room. A lot of people go through this and think they are alone." Hesitated. How? But Judith insisted. Let me write. No names. An open letter. Leon. How? About what it means to grow old, being discarded by the one you loved the most. Agreed. As long as it was anonymous. I just wanted someone, somewhere, to read it and feel less ashamed than I did. 2 days later, the letter was published on a local community network, a small news site. Man of Baum, I can't Folgry, but it circulated well here in Indiana. And what happened? It took me by surprise. In 3 days, there were hundreds of comments, people from all over the country saying, "This is my story too." Other ladies writing, "I raised alone. I did also tell the I was betrayed the same." Children saying, "I read it and I cried. I'll never treat my mother the same way again." I read everything in silence, each word as if it were a thread being sewn inside the chest. For the first time in years, I felt part of something. Belonging. Right. Belonging. Because there are pains that we think are ours alone, when in fact they are echoes of so many others that no one had the courage to say out loud. And look, let me ask you something. You, there, who are listening to me until now, have you ever experienced a scene that was engraved in your memory as a tattoo? Sometimes it's a phrase, a look, an absence. Sometimes it's a silent Sunday or a call that never came. If you've ever been through something like this, or know someone who has experienced something similar, comments below, shares. Sometimes your memory can be the push someone needs not to shut up to. And even with all this strength around, I still didn't know that the letter had ended up where Max would never have imagined. And it was going to turn the key to everything, because someone very important read it, and he decided to act. The phone rang on a gray Tuesday, one of those in which the wind carries a warning. It was Mr. Weber. Why? His voice came serious, but with the delicacy of someone who already knows that it is not easy to talk to a mother about certain truths. "Margaret, and my dear Madame, my sir, Hastings, he said, "No, I have received something that you urgently need to see. Can you stop by the office today?" Was in a wool coat, notebook in my bag. I step firmly. Even with my heart cold, I have already learned that certain truths, no matter how hard they may be, set you free. When he got there, leading the way, he greeted me with an expression that mixed respect and sadness. He handed me a brown envelope, sealed, bound, with some printed sheets. These emails were sent by Max to a real estate consultant early last year. He said, I sat down, open, and I started reading. The first was straightforward. My mother is going into decline. Nor soon. I will have control of the property. I would like to discuss renovations and possibilities of sale. Another, Weeks later, the house is old and land awry, but the location is excellent. We can modernize and rent it to university students. Later on, there was even a plan sketch, renovation budget, wow, and a profit estimate of more than $150,000. Max was planning to sell my house, my home, the home I built with my husband. How will I extend you? That I painted with my own hands, that I cleaned every fall, as one who takes care of an altar. And he planned to sell it before he could even declare me incapable. The words did not hurt me as before. It wasn't like that day of Lena's phone call. It was not like the court summons. This time, it was different, because there, in that office, as I held every page of that painstaking betrayal, I felt a strange peace, painful, yes, but firm. The innocence that still lived in a corner of mine, the one that believed that everything could be an error of judgment. A moment of Lena's influence died. He died there, in the second line of the third email, when he wrote, "We need to act fast. She is already 81. Muncher. Hands doctored it out in Chichabalusto. I have 71. He didn't even know my correct age, or he pretended not to know, to reinforce the theater of senility. It was at that point that I realized I was not a mother to him. How? I was an opportunity, a financial springboard with a soft voice. I walked back home slowly. The wind in Bloomington cut my face, but I didn't feel cold. I only thought of a phrase that had accompanied me since I was a little girl. There is silence that heals, and there is silence that sentences. I knew what mine would be now. The next day, I went to the stationery store in the center and bought a new stationery, one of those with a blue border. I wrote with my firm handwriting, as if drawing each end. Max, I am aware of your intentions with regard to the house in Bloomington. I hereby inform you that you have been officially removed from any inheritance or financial rights related to my assets. All legal documents have been updated. This is the last communication between us. Margaret, I put it in the envelope. Oh, I registered it in the mail, and I went to the balcony to wait for the postman to pass. When I delivered it into his hands, I felt that it was closing a cycle. Not angry, not with hatred, but with something that only those who have been deeply betrayed can understand. The decision to live without trying to make themselves understood anymore. And look, so far, you may think that everything has come to an end. But no, because after that letter, I'll die. Max did not remain silent, and the way he tried to turn the tables after that was even lower. Do you believe he tried to expose me publicly? That's that. But he forgot one thing. People who arm themselves with lies. He always stumbles over the truth, and that's when he fell. It was a muggy afternoon, the kind of heat that seems to stick to the skin. I was watering the plants on the porch when I heard the unmistakable sound of his footsteps climbing the 3 front steps. Max, the same son who didn't look me in the eye in court, now there, low down at my door, silent. without warning, without ceremony. Well, when I opened it, wow, it took me a second to recognize it. He was haggard, his eyes sunken, his beard unshaven, and a barely concealed sadness on his face. Mom, I said, I need to talk to you. The voice was trembling, but not from emotion, from despair. I didn't move. I stood on the threshold, with the hose still running water down the side of my leg. What? Can I come in? He asked, already pushing the door lightly. I held on tight. No. Is that it? That's when he started to disassemble. How? Lena dumped me. No. After we lost access to money, she said it wasn't worth it anymore. And but he rubbed his face, walked back and forth on my balcony. I did everything for love. We just wanted to build a better life. I made a mistake, but I was pressured. He spoke loudly, cried. Then he would scream. Then he knelt down, and I was there. Now, obviously, standing, steadfast, watching the man I once called my boy squirm, trying to stage repentance. You don't know what it's like to be alone. Mom, he bellowed, and I took a deep breath. No, I asked. Do you have any idea what it's like to be in a room with your own child and a lawyer trying to take what's yours and still stand? You tried to erase me, Max, and those who have made themselves whole are not erased. He cried more. He tried to touch my hand. I backed off, and there, wow, on that threshold, something changed inside me. For the first time, I didn't feel sorry. I didn't feel like taking him in. I didn't want to save thee. I just wanted him to leave, that I would take with him everything that weighed on me. The past, the emotional debt, the image of a son who no longer existed. I looked into his eyes, the same ones that once shone holding a dog named Benny in the yard, and said, You're reaping what you sowed, and I am reaping my peace. They sit on what not. I closed the door slowly. No bang, no shouting, no hurt. On the other side, he was silent, and so did I. And so did I. But for the first time, my silence was no pain. It was freedom. And if you think it ended there, it didn't end, because what came after that? It was unexpected, something that neither he nor I imagined, something that would transform not only the end of the story, but my family's name. Want to know what happened? Wait until you hear who showed up at my door a week later. It had been a week since Max had come to my door. Since then, and still, I haven't heard anything from him. And, to be honest, I haven't looked for it. Life here in Bloomington went on in the quiet rhythm of autumn days. The leaves were falling slowly, and the wind was already beginning to smell change. It was late afternoon when Eleanor knocked on the door, holding a warm apple pie with her hands protected by flowered cloths. She entered unceremoniously, as usual, and after a sip of tea, blurted out, with the naturalness of someone who does not fear the truth, Did you know Max was fired? It's been 3 weeks now. The information hit me with a dry silence. It didn't hurt. It didn't give pleasure either. It was like hearing that the rain fell far away. Eleanor continued. Lena came back to Denver. What a young or he left him. When are you? Oh, I just nodded. On. Max, who had always had arguments and maneuvers, was now alone. How? I later discovered through Mr. Nefar, Weber Jotan, yes, that his name began to circulate among support groups for the elderly, as an example of an attempt at family exploitation. His resume was stained. Their reputation is eroded on. Friends moved away, and today, they say, he lives in the house of an acquaintance from school, sharing a room in the basement. Oh, I didn't want any of that. Let it be clear. I did not pray for misfortune, nor did I move a straw to harm him. I just left. I just closed the door. I only chose to live the life he tried to wrest from me. And what fell apart, it was what he built himself. You know, there are things that we live and keep, but maybe by telling, we help another heart to breathe. Enjoy this video and subscribe, and let's make this story reach those who need it, because there are a lot of people going through similar pain, and sometimes all that's missing is a voice saying, "Oh, I." And sometimes all that's missing, you're not alone. The most curious thing of all is that after that, well, I started to notice different looks in the neighborhood. Wow. The lady who used to only shake from the balcony now stopped to talk. Young people started knocking on my door, saying that they had read the anonymous letter and wanted to hear more. They came with notebooks, tape recorders, or just ears. They wanted to know how a woman my age had managed to say no. How he had managed to protect himself. How he had managed to move forward without turning into stone. And there, between one cup of tea and another, I realized that I was no longer invisible. I, Margaret, who had been ignored at her son's own wedding, was now heard, respected, admired, not because I made noise, but because I resisted. And resisting, my dear, nigh, is a profound way of existing. But life still had one last page to show me, one last surprise, which not even Eleanor could explain. Something that made me sit down, take a deep breath, and rethink everything I thought I knew about forgiveness. Because the following week, a letter arrived, and it wasn't Max. It was late afternoon when the silence inside my house became louder than the noise of the street. You know, that kind of silence that calls us by name? That doesn't bother, but invites? Well, it was the one that led me to the desk in the corner of the room. I opened the drawer, took out the stationery I used to use for birthdays, and sat down, not to make lists or to write down accounts, but to write something that might be mine alone. I picked up the pen, took a deep breath, and started with 3 words that carried a lifetime. My son, Max. I wrote slowly. I wrote slowly, as if sewing memory by memory. I talked about the day he was born, so small, with his eyes narrowed and his skin wrinkled. Wow. I remembered the first fever, the sleepless dawn, no, the panic of a mother alone, with a trembling thermometer in her hand. I told him about when he fell on his bicycle in the back street, and how I ran barefoot, with my heart in my mouth and my soul in my hand. I talked about his smile when he entered college, and mine, which no one saw, when I closed the library to go buy the watch he wanted. I remembered each of these moments with tenderness. Yes, but also with astonishment, because now, when Eternaudicanta, you shall see well, looking from the outside, I realized how much of myself I left in every gesture, in every decision. No calm, and after your stout yourself. And I wrote, Max, I loved you more than I loved myself. I defended you from everything, including responsibility, and the price I paid was high. I was forgotten within the history that I built myself. The words came calmly, but with weight. They were not accusations. These were findings. There was no grudge. There was mourning, the mourning of a mother who lost her son while still alive, not by death, but by his choice to erase those who raised her. In the middle of the letter, I stopped. The sun came in, cut through the curtains, and drew streaks of light on the table. There, with moist eyes, I thought about how many mothers have felt this. The pain of not having been enough, even though it was everything. And a phrase came to my chest, like a whisper that I wanted to reach those who are listening to me now. There are loves that hurt not because they were missing, but because there were too many left. If this touches you, if you've ever felt something like this, stay with me until the end, because the strongest part still comes. I continued writing. I told him that I forgave him, but that I didn't want to see him, that he understood his choices, but that he no longer needed to understand them, that I wanted him to find peace, but far from mine. And I ended with what was perhaps the most sincere sentence I have ever written. Now, I have learned to choose myself. Folding that paper, I realized that I didn't want to put it in an envelope to send. He didn't want a stamp, nor a recipient. That was not for him. It was for me. It was what remained of everything I was, what I loved, what I lost, and from which, finally, I freed myself. I went to the backyard, took an iron bowl, put the letter inside, and lit a match. The flame started timidly, but soon swallowed each word elegantly. I watched the letters turn gray, the edges go up in smoke, and when the last curve of the letter M disappeared, I felt lightness. Why? The smoke rose and disappeared in the late afternoon sky, as if it took with it what held me. No, I didn't cry. He doesn't smile. No, I just breathed. For the first time, weightless, no guilt, because that letter didn't need to be read. It needed to be burned. But not all cards are made of paper. Some come in voice, others in surprise, and the biggest of all arrived the next day, with a name I never imagined hearing again. The months were getting ready like the autumn leaves are arranged in the backyard. Slowly, in their time. Well, after the letter, I burned. After the silence, after everything, life made room for other colors. I started going to the library every Tuesday, the same one where I worked for 38 years. But now, too, not to catalog books or replenish shelves, I was invited to teach reading classes to children. A small group, curious eyes, funny questions. They knew nothing about what I experienced. And, well, honestly, they didn't need to. They called me Miss Margaret. They listened to me attentively. I'm so well. And every time a difficult word was learned, it was as if I too relearned how to exist. Eleanor became my walking companion. She's sure what I saw. Every Thursday, we meet near the Beeline Trail. With big hats and bottles of water, we walk and talk. It talks about recipes, pains, dreams that didn't happen, others that arrived late. Then we sit on a bench near the park and read something, sometimes a poem, sometimes just silence. And look, there is a type of friendship that comes late, but arrives right. And with it came this new routine that no longer depends on anyone to be beautiful. The house is different too. Greener, charcoal guy. I planted peace lilies near the kitchen window, lavenders in the backyard. I changed the curtains. I gave the old carpets. Each small change was like a message to myself. You deserve lightness. And I started to live like this. No waiting for a car in the garage. Without preparing a table for two. Sometimes I bake cake. I send a piece to the neighbor on the right. Another to the guy who delivers letters. But I don't keep an eye on the gate. I don't wait for a call or news. The phone rings less. And I thank you. Friday became my favorite day. That's when I make my mint tea and sit on the porch. I watch the sun set behind the trees that surround my street. And at this moment, I don't think about Max, nor about Lena, Bill. I think about myself. No, how can't you know that it's today? And how I almost forgot who it was. On how love, when it's blind, sometimes takes us away from us. And I also think that God, Monsieur, in his infinite patience, did not let me win. Let me wake up. And wake up, my daughter, and I still know. It is the greatest victory. And if you think the story ends like this, with calm and tea on the balcony, know that destiny still had one last chapter. Because on one of those silent Fridays, while the sun slipped across the sky, I received a visitor who carried an old name, a forgotten voice, and a revelation that not even in my dreams could I imagine. That Friday, the sky was orange, still a little warm, although autumn was already warning that it was going to get cold. I was in my rocking chair, numb, tea in my hands, my feet covered with a thin blanket that Eleanor gave me. The birds made that beautiful noise in the late afternoon, and the wind played with the leaves in the yard. Everything calm. Yours, all mine. Now, Siham. It was there, in that peace, that the old questions began to return, not as pain, but as a visit. I thought about the time, how patient he is with us. He hopes we understand. Let us see. Non deo, darnifotap, sir. And only then, when we learn, does it change the seasons. I remembered when Max was little, how I said that everything had its time. The time to plant, the time to harvest, the time to stay, how, the time to go. But it took me a while to understand that a mother's love, although deep, does not have to be blind, because loving someone is not letting them erase you. It is teaching, as far as possible, to be whole without crushing the other. And when it doesn't work, it is knowing how to leave with dignity. I loved my son more than myself, and it was this imbalance that broke me. But now, at 71, anyhow, I understand that love cannot cost our souls. There, no. On the porch, I spoke to God. Not with spoken words, but with that kind of prayer that lives in our breath. He said he forgave, but that he did not forget, because forgetting, for me, would be disrespecting everything I felt. It would be like saying that it didn't hurt, that it didn't matter, that it didn't have weight, and it did. There was too much. But now, the weight doesn't sink me. He anchors me. Oh, it reminds me of where I came from, what I survived, and who I am. I also thought of the other women, in the many I met in Eleanor's group, in the stories I heard on tea afternoons, in the anonymous messages that arrived after that letter that went viral. There are thousands, millions, women who gave their lives for children, husbands, families, and they were left aside as an old ornament that no one wants anymore. But the truth, my daughter, say, is that within each silence of these women, there is a force that frightens, a force that, when awakened, does not need to be shouted. She moves in gesture, in choice, behind closed doors, calmly. I didn't tense, and I don't want revenge. I don't want Max to suffer, for Lena to pay, for the world to see my pain and clap their hands. I just want to live in peace. And I found that peace not in what they lost, but in what I let go, because freeing myself from them, from their need, from begging affection, I did what you are. One nice cut from illusory hope was like loosening a chain that I had put on my feet. I learned that true justice, it's emotional. It is to stop depending on the recognition of those who never knew how to value what they receive. It is to stop knocking on the door of those who have already shown that they do not want to open. Justice lives in the moment when we look in the mirror and say, now it's me for me. And that will do enough for you. Pentecost, adoration. No one takes away. It was at that very moment, almost cold tea, blanket on my lap, prayer in my chest, that I heard the gate open. It wasn't Max, nor Eleanor. Neither did the postman. Well, it was someone with his eyes, but with the heart of another time. And what that person said when he arrived, It still echoes here, because not everything we plant dies, and it has roots that, even forgotten, know the right time to bloom. I asked when the wedding was, and my daughter-in-law told me it had already happened. That day, I didn't miss just one event. I lost the illusion. I lost ground for a few weeks. But life, she is stubborn in offering us new beginnings, even when we think we are already too late for them. Today, wine. There is no more Lena. No Max. No lawyer at my door. They disappeared, as if fleeing from their own shadow. I remained. My balcony, my old kettle, my plants and a calm that cannot be bought anywhere. Sometimes I still remember Mac's little face, his smell after the shower. But now, those memories don't hurt. They just remind me that I was a real mother. When Cern upon Stockstadana, when I saw new cutie, I was whole. I gave everything. And even though I am not recognized, I do not regret having loved. I just learned that loving the other cannot mean forgetting myself. Because at the end of the day, who's going to hold your hand? It's yourself. The biggest lesson of this whole road was this. We can be left by many, but we only lose when we abandon ourselves. I almost abandoned myself, but I came back, and I came back stronger. Because being old is not an end. It is accumulated wisdom. It's a filter. We let go of what tires and hold on tightly to what lights us up inside. If you've made it this far, thank you very much. I feel that I told this story not only for myself, but for so many others who live in silence, giving themselves until they disappear. If somehow my report touched your heart, leave a like on this video. For me, it's like a hug that arrives warm. And if you want to come back for another cup of coffee and another lived story, subscribe here to the channel. I did. There is still a lot that I keep in my chest, and who knows, it can help you heal yours too. Tell me in the comments which city you are listening to me. It's good to feel that, even in silence, there are people on the other side. And it activates the bell. That way you don't miss out when the coffee is brewed again. Don't go away yet. Listen to the next true story that will appear on the screen. Always remember, each wrinkle tells a story, and each story carries a strength. Watch the next video here on the channel with another incredible story.